Hi, everyone, and welcome once again to this series. As you know, we're doing this series to help leaders and HR professionals in all their companies to get inspiration from what other companies here in Singapore and Southeast Asia are doing to cope with and possibly even find opportunity in this COVID crisis. So today we have the pleasure to have joining us Miss Melisa Teoh, the GM and Chief Marketing Officer at MyDoc, who was just voted the Telehealth Company of the Year by Frost and Sullivan's study. I'll leave Melisa to introduce herself and her company in more detail. She'll do a much better job than I would. So welcome to the show, Melisa.
Thank you for having me. So MyDoc's been around for 7 to 8 years. So, recently we have been pretty involved in helping to alleviate some fears that's been caused by the COVID-19 crisis. We've launched a COVID-19 clinic as a public service to the community in Singapore. This happened on February 14th. Since then, the clinic has been open for global access to support communities elsewhere outside of Singapore, just as a response to requests that have come to us from countries beyond our island, because people perceive Singapore's medical healthcare facilities and quality of MOH care and guidelines to be very reliable. So since then, we've been pretty involved in supporting healthcare systems elsewhere. We are also expanding into the US because of this.
Wow. That's wonderful, and I'm so glad to have you on this series today, because we want really keen to get a healthcare perspective on the crisis, and based on what you're seeing from the usage patterns and demand patterns, how serious do you think this health situation is right now? I mean, in Singapore we see the numbers every day, 30, 70, 100, but we don't really know what the extent of the severity is.
I think it's anybody's guess right now. Based on the experts that we deal with, because this virus is asymptomatic, the risk of it spreading is very high. Right now, the numbers that are being reported, apparently it looks like for every infected person, 2 or 3 others could be infected pretty easily and pretty fast. And the effects last for about 2 weeks, sometimes more, in some cases 3 to 6 weeks. So it's pretty severe, especially from the perspective of the healthcare system. If we are not able to, or if a society is not able to keep the curve pretty flat, then what happens is the system will be overwhelmed. And if you think about the situation, that pretty much means that a domino effect gets created, right? Because the hospitals don't just need to care for those who are infected by the virus, but they need to care for all the other patients with other needs. And if it's overwhelmed, then who gets rejected, right? Who's going to get the respirator and who's not? Those are pretty challenging issues. So we are working very hard to ensure that the system doesn't get overwhelmed, which is why, as a telemedicine, telehealth provider, this is a time when we are able to come in and supplement the traditional healthcare system in quite a significant way to make sure we triage patients and we separate the ones who have a serious need from the ones who have the common cough and cold.
That's a super mission that you guys are doing right now. I mean, the augmentation of the healthcare system through telehealth must be helping to relieve our hospitals and healthcare providers at the front lines to deal with just the most critical cases. And in your own experience, as you're thinking about how companies are going about continuity planning, and even for yourself, thinking about business continuity during this time where people are working remote, what are some of your key considerations?
I think one thing we're cognizant of is this virus is going to be around for a while. For how long, no one knows, but what everyone knows for certain is that it's not going away. So I was on a call recently with Sir Peter Piot. He's the guy who discovered Ebola, and he's obviously very actively involved in the current virus crisis. he basically advised us to learn how to live with it. That's the advice from the experts, right? And so, as a business, not only because we are in healthcare, but I think generally for any business, we truly need to figure out a way to carry on and manage our personal lives, businesses, and figure out a way to work with the situation. So, how do you work from home? How do you manage productivity and continue running your business while not being able to be in one place physically, right? So, some of these things are, I think, what a lot of the, especially the large companies, are trying to figure out. As a smaller firm, we have always been a lot more nimble. We rely a lot on technology, web calls like this, webinars, and so forth. They are part and parcel of how we run our business anyway, because we have remote distributed team members everywhere. And we've always been connecting with people over video calls to stay in touch as a team and to work and collaborate across, borders. So for us, it hasn't been really a big change. There's been some impact, obviously, because clients and so forth are having to maintain a social distance, and we want to maintain a social distance and keep people safe as well. So it's forced us to change the way we interact with other companies. But so far, so good. It seems like most of the partners and clients that we deal with are pretty nimble themselves. They seem to be adjusting pretty fast. I think we had one recent scare. I think one of our partner companies had someone who was infected in the team. So momentarily during that day, there was almost a shutdown, obviously, because they had to contain the situation, figure out, who else infected and do the contact tracing that they needed to do. That impacted productivity on that day, right? Meetings were canceled and so forth. But otherwise, it's BAU at MyDoc.
Wow. And in terms of how people are feeling, are they a little bit more scared or concerned? And how do you go about, even as BAU, right? How do you go about understanding how they are thinking and feeling, so that you can calibrate your management action accordingly?
We have regular conversations. I personally have regular conversations with my team. I have silly meetings like virtual town hall, because I know that we like to be social. Quite a few members in the team are pretty sociable types, right? Or extroverted types. And so I kind of just thought about, what's it like for them to be isolated at home, like for days, right? Not just one day, but just isolated for a whole week. It must not feel very good. It's not energizing for them. So I will create meetings like, let's meet up virtually just to check in for 5 minutes, blah, blah, no real agenda, just to create some social interaction and allow people to just relax and feel connected. So I do things like that just to stay in touch with them, just check in, make sure everyone's okay. And my colleagues who handle the other parts of the team, they have regular chats. We are chat junkies. People are on Slack, they are on Hangouts, practically all day. It's nonstop. So the connection is always there. I think in terms of general anxiety, I think somewhere in the back of people's minds, of course, there's concern about what's going to happen to the economy, right? If things progress and they continue to balloon, like in some of the markets, I was looking at the numbers, the 21% recovery rate around the world on average is not. However, optimistically, if you look at China, 93% recovery rate, right? So it already shows what needs to be done. The only question is the rest of the world able to create that social cohesion fast enough for us to see those numbers? And how long is it going to take before we will start seeing that level of recovery rate? And therefore, what's the impact on the economy and people's rice bowls, right? So obviously the team obviously has some concerns about that. Luckily, we are based in Singapore. The government has been very, visionary, and they've been steadily managing the situation from week to week. And because of the subsidies, it's, I think, kept things relatively calm. People are not as nervous and filled with anxiety, and therefore we are able to function and continue to function rationally, which is important, I think, in containing the situation.
Mm. And I think you touched on this earlier about expecting that this is going to last for a while. And in fact, some estimates have put this at 2, 3 years, or maybe this is just a new normal, right, that we have to get used to.
Yes. Mm.
So what is one thing that you suggest that the leaders in other businesses think about as they plan for this new normal or the challenges ahead?
Oh, that's a big question. It's hard to speak for everyone, right? I think for us, right, it's I think part of the reason why we seem to be able to handle things relatively normally, partly because obviously we're in healthcare. So unlike many of the industries, we are in an interesting place where while others are seeing their markets shrink, we are seeing ours expand because it's meeting a huge demand now. But I think aside from that, what's working for us is also being mission driven and very focused on a vision that our entire team is committed to, even in good times, right? With or without crisis, we recruit people who are committed to the vision. Like there's not a single person in my team who doesn't share the mission, because that's very much part of my interview process. If I don't get that someone shares the same level of passion and commitment, then that person doesn't fit the team, because it is a challenging ride, as you know, right? And being a founder, it's not easy. This is not easy street. Without your heart in it, you really are not going to make it through all the peaks and the troughs that of this roller coaster ride. And so I think because of that, being bound together, working on a mission, we are undeterred by the external situation, right? It doesn't change who we are, doesn't change what we're about. We continue driving as
Mm.
hard as possible, right? And when it comes to how we manage our costs, I think being very prudent is critical. Our founders have always been very prudent. Even in marketing, right? I wouldn't even spend $500 if I don't need to. I will absolutely find a different way to do things. Creativity comes in many different shapes and forms. We don't always need to throw money at every marketing activity. And so I think that needs to be part and parcel of fabric. I guess for the larger companies, they will probably end up behaving more and more like startups out of necessity, right? Which will be a good thing, because you'll naturally rationalize the things that you need, things that you don't. In fact, one of my friends sent me a video which was quite interesting yesterday. It's a video about how nature thanks the virus. It's nature's way of resetting things and calming everyone down and bringing focus back to what's really important. It's forcing us to stay at home, be with our families, and so on. It's quite a funny one. I thought it's an interesting point of view, right? So
Yeah,
I think
it's
even
interesting
when it comes to
perspective.
business, it's forcing us to evaluate what's really important and what
Mm.
isn't, and make decisions accordingly, right? Which is good business practice in the end.
Mm. That's a great point. So you make sure that you surround yourself with great talent, and then instill a strong sense of mission in that talent. Be extremely prudent, and get back to basics, right? Like what is it that matters the most?
Mm.
This has been a wonderful time for me, just learning from you, Melissa, and thank you so much for taking the time. Everyone, this has been another edition in this series, featuring Miss Melisa Teoh, GM and Chief Marketing Officer at MyDoc. And I have been Chitong, as always, CEO and co-founder of Engage Rocket. Thank you very much, and tune in again soon.
Thank you.